page 6 of my bio homework due, so if I do that and my calc homework tomorrow after school, then I can get my food done and eaten before I go to play practice. I hope play practice goes well tonight. Pat's not going to be there, so I might have sort of a rough start. I really had a rough start this morning, too. I barely got out of bed in time to be here. Wait, shouldn't I be paying attention to someone's speech right now? So over 90% of you said that you experience mind wandering on a daily basis. So a lot of you probably experience exactly what I just detailed regularly. In this speech, I will inform everyone about mind wandering, what it is, what causes it, the types, and its relationship to both mental illness and creative thinking. So now a little bit about mind wandering. Mind wandering in reality is an umbrella term that includes task-unrelated thought, stimulus-independent thought, self-generative thought, and zoning and tuning out. This and the definition of phenomenon in which attention drifts away from task-related thoughts towards task-unrelated thoughts are given by Kavagi and others in the association with mind wandering and trait and state levels. Now there's 3 different categories of mind wandering, and these categories are given by Joshua Shepard in Why Does the Mind Wander? First is the intent of an individual, so it's whether intentional or unintentional. Second is the external stimuli, so a car horn honking outside or a drill in the hallway. And the third is the dynamics of mind wandering, so whether the mind has deliberate or automatic constraints during an episode. So now that you know a little bit about mind wandering, we can talk about why it occurs. In reality, the actual reason is a little bit unclear. It's still up for debate, but the majority say that when the mind wanders, it considers the task to be not stimulating enough, so it decides to find something else to think about. Now to prove this, Shepard states, mind wandering is caused by the cognitive control system precisely when and because the expected value of whatever the agent is doing is deemed too low. Kavagi and others suggest the following relationship between mind wandering and unmotivating tasks as another hypothesis. The more unmotivating a task, the more likely mind wandering is. Now, mind wandering is a relatively new term. In 2006, Shepard states that only 2 authors use the term in a title or abstract, whereas in 2018, the term applied in 132 titles and abstracts. And that is because the increase in importance in its relationship to mental illness and things such as ADHD. So moving on to the types, first we have deliberate mind wandering. This is wandering that is consciously allowed by an individual. It's intentional. So Paul Selly states on the relation of mind wandering and ADHD symptomatology that deliberate mind wandering can be far less harmful to an individual's mindfulness. He states that deliberate, intentional shifts seem not to reflect problems in inhibiting distracting information, but instead reflect the willing engagement of thought, which is perhaps indicative of controlled processing. Now, deliberate mind wandering occurs far less often than spontaneous mind wandering, which is what we will be going into next. Sorry. So, spontaneous mind wandering, on the other hand, is completely unintentional, and this is what we'll be focusing on for the remainder of the speech. Spontaneous mind wandering can lead to interference with tasks. Behavioral studies have shown that mind wandering has a negative impact on performance in both the laboratory and daily functioning, according to Liat Goldbard and Claudine Alali-Moore-Levy, and the connection between mind wandering, ADHD, and level of performance on an attention task. So now that we know about the types of mind wandering, let's move on to what it relates to. So first we'll be talking about ADHD, which is a neurodevelopmental disorder. This includes hyperactivity, attention deficit, and impulsiveness. This is important because mind wandering can relate to ADHD symptomatology and can indicate ADHD even more so than the symptoms of inattentiveness and hyperactivity. So, according to Goldbard and Alali-Moore-Levy, ADHD is linked to poor academic performance, elevated response variability, and short attention span. Now, there's some speculation as to whether ADHD and mind wandering are actually related. Researchers say that the aforementioned symptoms may provide a base for mind wandering being central to ADHD, but some say that mind wandering actually relates to patience, controlled processing, and premeditation, which are definitely not in common with ADHD symptomatology. So now we can move on to a different type of mental illness, which is depression. Yukin, Dang, and others focus on the positive correlation between mindfulness and redirecting depressive emotions in their article, The Relationship Between Mindfulness, Depression, and Mind Wandering. They state that higher quality of consciousness helps individuals to promote self-regulation of negative emotion. Now, to promote self-regulation, you need a clear and focused mind, which is far less common in depressed and mentally ill individuals. Deng and others could also state that the connection between depression and mind wandering by saying, participants induced with more negative mood were prone to experience wandering mind. This doesn't necessarily relate to just depression. It can relate to other mental illness such as anxiety, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, or even just being sad sometimes. So now, on a more positive note, we'll move to creativity. So although mind wandering may be associated with mental disorders such as ADHD and depression, it may also relate to creativity. Jill Susie explains in her article how mind wandering may be good for you, the relationship between mind wandering and creativity. They both use the same area of the brain at a given point in time, the prefrontal cortex. She also suggests that mind wandering may serve as a foundation for creative inspiration. So other positive thought includes happiness. So even though mind wandering may generally be associated with a negative mood, Suti explains that people tended to be in a negative mood when they mind wandered, but when researchers examined the content of people's thoughts during mind wandering, they found an interesting caveat. If participants' minds were engaged in interesting off-task musings, their mood became more positive rather than more negative. So this essentially means that negative mood can lead to mind wandering, but it typically leads to a more positive mood after the fact. So now we can talk about job and school performance. So taking a break from work to let the mind wander can actually improve performance. According to Suti, when she explained an experiment by saying there's better and faster performance as well as decreased response time, which leads to improved productivity. Now, finally, we have goal setting, which, according to a study examined by Suti again, she says that people with mind wandering ultimately came up with more concrete and higher quality goal descriptions than people with no mind wandering. This is because mind wandering gives an individual time to actually think about what about the possible solutions to a problem they may be facing. Now, in general, mind wandering has positive and negative opinions, and they're somewhat contradictory sometimes. And many of you in this class agree. About 50% of you said that the positivity or negativity of mind wandering actually depends on the situation. So at school, it can be a negative thing because you're supposed to be paying attention, but at home, if you're just trying to relax, it can be a positive. So, with the information provided in my speech, you are better able to understand the key details of mind wandering. What it is, what causes it, the types, and its relationship to both mental illness and creative thinking. I hope your mind didn't wander too far while you were listening, and thank you for listening to my speech.